The Vikings were down by 33 points yesterday and came back and won a game against the Colts.
Wow.
Where do you even want to start with this?
Like everything that was going wrong. It was such a comedy of errors. Block punt, Cook fumble, 4th and 1 stuff, fake punt down 20-0. The punter sails the ball. It is hard to throw the kicking ball. That's an underrated thing, by the way. Whenever someone runs,
just go for it.
So run a fake punt down 20-0. Just go for it. Yeah. Oh, Rager drifting to cause an interception. Oh my God. He caused both interceptions were on him. God dang. But yeah, though it's yeah, and the Colts were teeing off on everything underneath. Like they're like, hey, they're not pushing it. Let's play downhill. And then everything else happened in that game. Everything else it was insane. Every time I looked up, I was like, wait, this is happening. You can feel even the stadium getting more into it as the game went along, obviously, but it was crazy that it actually happened.
I mean, just so much soft zone coverage. I mean, I don't.
Oh my God.
It's one of those games where I want to destroy the Colts for how they handled the second half, but I also understand how they were handling it. It's like, all right, we'll just let them complete some stuff underneath, and then it's literally never happened in NFL history for a team to come back from 30 points down, and somehow it happens. I just, and now the Vikings.
The ghost of Frank Reich. That's just came back to get him.
I know. I mean, it was a conversation yesterday on the internet about what this says about the Vikings and everything else. I don't know if it says much about the Vikings other than their offense can get rolling, and we know that. Like they have a quarterback who can absolutely get hot. We've seen him get hot a million times. They have, for my money, the best receiver in the league. KJ Osborne had a massive day yesterday.
I was so out on him going into last week, and then he shreds it. That's how it goes.
I will say this idea that I know that the 2 fumbles were called back, and obviously it's a couple bad breaks in that game. The Vikings this season have they have 41 first downs by penalty. No one else in the league has more than 32. They've accepted 27 more penalties than have been called on them. Only the Falcons have more. They've added 13.3 EPA per penalty this year on offense. Only the Broncos have more. So there is not some grand conspiracy from the referees that are holding back the Minnesota Vikings this season. I just want to be clear about that.
It's just the refs in general. No, I was the offense. I just can't. We're probably gonna break them down again, and I'm gonna be like, I still don't know what they are, like as far as what they're good at, because it just depends. I will say that they do know how to adapt and get their guy going. Their guy being Justin Jefferson. Yeah. The Lions game last week was really cool to see. Was the Lions doubling them just like they did the first time they played, and then seeing the Vikings figure out ways to get Justin Jefferson open was one of the cool. Those are the little things that are cool in football, is watching the scheme and the counter adjustments to each other. So, but they do try, and the red zone designs are good, and it's just that the sustainability sometimes is just it's very inconsistent. That's how this team always feels.
And we can keep talking about that. And I think it's a totally fair point. You know, if you look at any metric, like they are, and that was part of the conversation yesterday. It's like the joke about whether the Vikings are good. Asking whether the Vikings are good isn't a statement that the Vikings are bad. No, the Vikings are somewhere in the middle. Like the Vikings are somewhere in the very large group of middle ground teams in the NFL who have had a lot of fortunate breaks over the course of a 14-game schedule. They had some unfortunate breaks yesterday and still managed to win that game. They deserve a shitload of credit for not backing down in that game and not folding. They deserve an unbelievable amount of credit. What it takes for you to have that sort of hold over your locker room, for them to come out and even think they had a chance in hell to win that game, says a lot about the overall influence that Kevin O'Connell and that staff has had on that team. Because maybe this is reading a little bit too much into it. If that situation happens last year and under the previous regime, I think they pack up and go home. And they didn't yesterday, and they deserve a ton of credit for that. And they've done that all season. And I really do think that it feels different in that building, and has felt different in that building from the moment that he got there.
Right.
That doesn't mean that this game says that the Vikings are one of the best teams in the NFL. But guess what? Do they have to be?
No.
Do they have to be based on the way the rest of the NFC looks and the way that the rest of the entire playoff picture looks? There are no truly great teams in the league right now. They're just dominating people on either side of the ball. I think the Eagles are pretty damn good. I think the Bills at their best are pretty damn good. And the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
We've seen the Cowboys have really uneven performances over the last few weeks. We know that the Niners, while the rest of that roster is fantastic, they have a rookie 7th round pick who is now their quarterback. And I think that the takeaway from Thursday that it doesn't matter who plays quarterback for the Niners is really interesting to me. They did not run away with that game. I'm still have my doubts about what the Niners offensive ceiling looks like when playoff time comes against really, really good teams, even if I do think Brock Purdy's done a very good job. But if you're the Vikings, you are going to make the playoffs. You are going to host a home playoff game.
Yeah.
It's only been like 10 months since a team that looked a lot like the Minnesota Vikings in every single advanced metric, in some of the luck stats that we talked about, in the inconsistencies of their offense, went to the Super Bowl and almost won it. So it can happen. And I'm not saying it can't happen. It's just hard to do it for 3-4 games in a row in the playoffs when you aren't that complete high-level contender. But that doesn't mean it can't happen. It has not been that long since we just watched it.
It's the NFL. It's any given Sunday.
And when you have the best player on the field, pretty much every game you're going to play in, because of the way that number 18 is playing, you're going to have a shot. And that quarterback can get streaky as hell. And I think that if he gets hot in one of those games, like he did against the Lions last week, even though the defense let them down, that's what's concerning to me. It's not about the offense. I think the offense absolutely has a ceiling with how much they're pushing the ball down the field now since Hawkinson got there, and what they've looked like in the passing game since that trade happened and how the structure of it has changed. And the offensive line with Darisaw back, even though I'm still concerned about the interior, I still think their offensive ceiling can take them a lot of places. The defense is concerning. They played against a team this week that has been one of the worst offenses in football over the course of the season. And the defense is the thing that was bottoming out over the last few games. So that's where I would have the most concerns. But I think their offensive ceiling, they can get hot and they can give you problems. And they're going to be in the playoffs, and we'll see what ends up happening.
Yeah, that a few weeks ago, that's what I said. They're fine. It's just that, we're just looking, like you said, you look at all the underlying metrics and you wait, we're analyzing this as well. We're just trying to go like, hey, this is what they have to improve on. This is what is not sustainable or what we don't think. But the thing is, they can, like you just said, they air that ball out. Explosive plays, can be kind of a coin flip stuff. We say 50-50 balls and everything. They do it in a different way than just go balls. But what if you hit all of them? What if you win 7 out of 8 coin flips in your game? Like that can happen in the NFL. There'll always, a lot of teams I've been around, they always say just the goal is to get to the dance, which is the playoffs.
Yes.
Anything can happen in the dance. Anyone can win. So, and the Vikings have enough guys and they're very like a professional team. That's like the best compliment.
Absolutely, they are.
That's what
that's kind of how the Bengals felt last year.
Yes, they're professional. They're not like a laughing stock where it's like, wow, this team's super low. It wasn't like remember the Cardinals got hot at the beginning of last year, and it was just like, I don't know though. Like I don't know how much how this can sustain. I don't get that with the Vikings. Or it's more just like there's a lack of consistency with them, but they can get their upper peaks are really good, and so that's just what we're always kind of like questioning about them is what they can hit. But that's the thing. They're making the playoffs and it's good and it's fun. And that's fun. They're a fun team. So
the last thing I want to say before we get out of here, joking about whether the Vikings are good, which became a bit on this show because it was who knew over the first 8 games of the season. And we would ask everyone that came on. Asking and joking about whether the Vikings are good is not saying the Vikings are bad. There are many answers over that large spectrum of what an NFL team can be, and they have been hard to pin down, and they are not a bad team by any stretch. And I think that's important for me to communicate before we end this show tonight.
But again, that's a great point you brought up. They could have folded anytime in that game. It sucks to get blown out in the NFL. And you don't have some backup freshmen you can play like in college when you're getting blown out. They're like, hey, get them some reps. No, your starters are playing through all those 4 quarters. And do you think they want to fit up on duo or just run down on kickoff and block on punt return? Like do any of that? No, they don't want to do that in a blowout. So the fact that they just kept competing, it does speak to them. So I'm so glad you brought that point up because they keep competing. This Viking team always competes in every game. That speaks to what they're doing.